Hello, it's September 28, 2020. This is a design and planning update for the Little 5 Points Mobility Study. My name's Matt Cherry. I'm an urban designer with Lord X Sargent. The project is funded by the City of Atlanta, its Renew Atlanta office, and the Atlanta Regional Commission. The implementation manager is the Little 5 Points CID. The planning team is, of course, our firm, Lord X Sargent, and our engineering partner is Kimley Horn and Associates. So overall, real quickly, this video is kind of the second in a two-part video series. The first one we did was in June. This is an update. We're going to show you a lot of new concepts, content, thoughts on strategies for the overall district in terms of mobility, placemaking, land use. I'm not going to go over a ton of the same things that we talked about in June because you can go back. That video is still up. In the previous video we talked about the mobility network for the overall district. We talked about the Euclid Avenue redesign. We looked at development opportunities and land use within the district. So for this video, here's the things that we're going to focus on. I'm going to do a quick recap of the project. I'm going to talk about wayfinding. I'm going to talk about design guidelines for public spaces in Little 5 Points. Because Euclid Avenue is such a key piece embedded in the overall planning effort, I'm going to talk about some recommendations we have for that and kind of take you on a tour of the future Euclid Avenue. Within the overall Little 5 mobility study, there's some other mobility efforts that I'll talk about at the end, such as parking and Moreland Avenue. And then all that is sort of teeing up to an online survey and then a virtual workshop that we're having next week. The virtual workshop will be next Thursday, October 8th from 6 to 9 p.m. The online survey is live with this video. The links to both of those things are in the description of the video below. Here's a quick recap. Here are the study areas. It's really twofold for the project. The yellow is the overall planning effort, and the blue is the detailed sort of redesign, pedestrian improvements, mobility improvements for Euclid Avenue. Here's where we are in the planning process. The last workshop and video I did in June, we were kind of right in the middle. Now we're kind of about 3/4 of the way through the process, wrapping up final recommendations with a report at the end of the year. We did some existing conditions analysis in the first few months of this year, January, February, March. We looked at a variety of different conditions. All of those are up on the project website. We've done a series of design workshops. The first one was right before the pandemic. We had that in February at the Little 5 Points Center for Arts and Community. The results of that are encapsulated in a memo that is also on the website. And then we did another series of workshops, two in June of this year that were virtual. I'm going to talk more about this today, but we have looked very closely at Euclid Avenue. So many opportunities along Euclid Avenue. Here's an existing condition between Colquitt and Moreland. Findlay Plaza here. This is an early design concept for pedestrian improvements, mobility, loading zones, ride share zones, street trees, green infrastructure. We looked at land use and redevelopment. Here's a susceptibility to change map. We looked at specific sites. We looked at, this is the Bass Field site, the existing addition. We also looked at the site across the street on Moreland Avenue. Here's one concept of a couple that we showed for Bass Field, illustrating some potential redevelopment fundamentals. I think we got some great feedback at the last time on this. And then there will be some questions about this in the online survey that is live with this video. So if you want to go back and sort of dig in deeper, if you missed the previous discussion about Bass Field or land use, go back and look at the June video. We looked at previously at mobility framework for the overall district. We're looking at existing bike and mobility networks, planned networks, and then we're sort of trying to, in the darker blue, trying to sort of connect the dots and get people via other modes other than car into the district. So that's our recap. Okay, now let's look at some new concepts that we've been working on. starting with wayfinding. We kind of use the Georgia Tech Planning Studio project from 2019 as sort of a jumping off point for talking about wayfinding. One thing that was very astute that they talked about in the study, I think, is this notion that little 5 points seem sort of hidden from nearby assets. So in other words, it's pretty easy to get to little 5 points if you're on a bike or scooter or walking, but the actual best route is sort of vague. And so that's part of what wayfinding is all about. So here's a potential wayfinding locations map that we put together. It's sort of two categories. One is what we call peripheral signage locations. So these would be locations along the edge of little 5 points that are meant to help get people to the district. And then the other category would be little 5 points core signage locations that sort of you're in the district and that's sort of telling you where to get within the district, and also sort of how to get out of the district the best way. And so we're going to show you some concepts for both of those, starting with the peripheral wayfinding. When talking to the steering committee for the project, they really wanted a wayfinding system that's very, very simple, that's not fussy. And so what this is just a very durable steel sign that can be on its own pole, or it could be attached to a existing light or utility pole. It is sort of steel and it has a die cut of the logo. It tells you how to get to little 5 points. One thing I think is cool about it, somebody from our steering committee mentioned, instead of being in miles, the unit is footsteps, which I think helps sort of reinforce this notion that we want people to be able to freely get to little 5 points easily by foot. Here's another idea for peripheral wayfinding, and this is sort of in line with the spirit of street art for little 5 points, I suppose. And this is this idea of pavement graphics. So a paint type material that could be very easily applied in the same way graffiti or a mural would be applied very deliberately to the surface you're walking on. And in this case, this is sort of a photo coming out of the park in Inman Park, coming from the MARTA station. You're going to take a right onto Euclid Avenue to get to Little 5 Points. It's just sort of a reinforcement of the brand and the logo of Little 5 Points. The product could be a similar product to, it doesn't have to be just paint because that would wear quickly. It can be a similar product to like what we use for green bike lanes. It's a product called MMA. It's kind of like a thermoplastic, but it's sort of less slippery. And here are some ideas for Little 5 Points core wayfinding signage. This is sort of a more colorful and sort of wild sort of concept that maybe could be customized for each unique place. These could also easily be just the steel. They don't have to be the colored, but I just wanted to show some variety here. They both tell, when you're in Little 5 Points, they sort of tell you how to get to different trails, different mobility systems, MARTA station, etc., from Little 5 Points, and they can also be used to sort of indicate and celebrate key places like Findlay Plaza, Greg Davis Plaza, things like that. They can be on their own pole, but there's a lot of clutter out there in the public right of way and public realm, so it's important to have a way for them to just sort of clip and sort of be bracketed onto existing poles and things. Okay, so very closely related to wayfinding are design guidelines. And for those of you that don't know, what we're talking about when we say design guidelines, we're talking about common materials that can be used in public spaces in a district. For instance, Central Atlanta Progress has their own for downtown. Midtown Alliance has their own set of design guidelines for Midtown. And then now Little 5 Points is a relatively new community improvement district. Part of this process is to create their own set of public space design guidelines. So when we think about design guidelines for Little 5 Points, is this very unique and dynamic place? What are the characteristics of it that its public spaces should embrace? What you're seeing on screen is sort of a collection, sort of a mishmash of the different a lot of the different things that stakeholders, neighbors, business owners have said throughout this process. And so this is sort of our jumping off point for that. Findlay Plaza is a project that is forthcoming it's another Renew Atlanta project. This is a design that was done by Pond & Company, another firm in Atlanta, for a new Findlay Plaza. The reason I'm showing it is because when we talk about design guidelines, this project includes a series of sort of site furnishings, bike racks, benches, and then this is tree well fencing. It sort of helps keep plants alive within a tree well. So when we think about seating in public spaces, we really have to think about that very differently than you might think about seating for your dining room table or in another private space. We think about how will people likely use seating? Are they going to sit on a bench in a plaza for an hour or 2 hours? Or are people more likely to take a rest for maybe 5, maybe 10 minutes outside of a business while they're waiting for their spouse or family member or friend to finish shopping? In our experience, it's usually the latter. And so a lot of the times, especially in a primarily commercial district, you want sort of short-term seating that is indestructible, maintenance-free, but is not going to really accommodate sleeping or extensive loitering. And so that's kind of what these ideas are showing. These are super sort of indestructible granite slab benches, very, very widely available in Georgia. They can be, you see them in some of the Beltline parks, Old Fourth Ward Park. Great. It's a great bench. You can't really destroy it. Skateboarders can use it. It's not really a big deal, but you can sit on it. There's also precast concrete seating that's maybe a little more stylized that could be used. And these are some of the things that we're thinking about for Euclid Avenue. And as we go through the concepts for Euclid Avenue, you'll see these sort of find their way into some of those concepts. Street trees. We're recommending really 2 categories of street trees for corridors and public spaces. One are overstories trees; those are shade trees, and then the other are understories, and use those when you have constraints like power lines overhead. So for overstory, there's lots of different species and cultivars of oaks. The design for Findlay Plaza has, I believe, High Point nettle oaks. So we think that that's a great. There are 33 species in Georgia. That's a great selection for many of the streets and public spaces, including Euclid Avenue. Tulip poplar is another one that's good. They grow very, very fast. They get large quickly. It would be a good choice for Little 5 Points because you get a quicker canopy that is pretty resilient to urban conditions. For understory, Chinese pistache, it's not native to Georgia. We know this. We would love to use more native, but we also need something that's more bulletproof. Chinese pistache is a very low litter tree, nice fall color. It can be used under power lines, no problem. American hornbeam is another good selection, we think. Interesting tree, native or natively adapted, but sometimes hard to find. We're just giving sort of different potential species within these 2 categories. Fencing and tree protection, I talked about a minute ago. Many of you who go to Little 5 Points, you may be familiar with this area in front of the yacht club. I'm just using this as an example. I'm not trying to pick on the yacht club or anybody else, but these trees are near death. And so what do we do in cases like this where we have a really narrow sidewalk and we want street trees? In this case, this is a product called FlexiPave. You see these photos on the right here. It's a pervious sort of granular material. It's an aggregate material. It's not rubber. It's an aggregate material that has a binding agent that can be poured down and then adheres to the ground. You can walk over it, but it allows water infiltration into the tree's root systems. It's relatively inexpensive, and it can be, unlike a conventional tree grate, it can be easily modified as the tree grows out. In cases where we have the room, we can use the tree well fencing like is shown in Findlay Plaza. It's interesting, Midtown and downtown and these other CIDs tend to have their sort of their own sort of unique spin on tree well fencing. The landscape architect for Findlay Plaza sort of came up with this sort of arch design. So as we're talking about Euclid, I'll show you that notion of an arch. We sort of abstracted that into a different material and different application of that arch along Euclid Avenue, and could be used in other areas throughout Little 5 Points. I showed this in the last video. This is Euclid at Colquitt, current condition. And then this is a potential condition showing green infrastructure, shortened pedestrian crossing distance, street art, what we call enhanced sharrows for bicycles. And then one thing I did want to point out, you see these tree well guards? These are just basically pieces of rebar, steel rebar that are bent, or they come in a arch shape. They're mortared in to help protect the plant material in the tree well. They're kind of the design of them the idea of them is abstracted from that tree well fencing shown in the plaza with the arches. But the advantage here is that if a car hits it or if something happens to it, these pieces of rebar are just mortared in. If somebody hits it, you just pull the one out and you replace it. It's also just aesthetically sort of industrial, and it's simple and it's inexpensive, and I think would be a good solution to the heavy foot traffic and beating that Euclid Avenue takes every day. Okay, now we're moving west along Euclid Avenue. This is mid-block with the Variety Playhouse here in the distance. El Bandito on the right. Here's the existing addition. Photo was taken last week. And here we are at the potential. Some things I want to point out. One, starting on the right here, there are about 6 parking spaces in front of El Bandito and the other retail buildings here. What we're simply saying here is that let's move those 6 spaces out on the street, and we're actually able to create spaces on street where they don't exist because there's no formalized on-street parking out here. And so what that does is it opens up a huge world of opportunity for really amazing outdoor dining here. And so it also, you may notice that here's sort of before and after we're moving this curb out a few feet. We're not really sure why it's sort of set back now. Creates opportunities for formalized parking spaces in front of Elmire that could be used as a parklet. It could be used for outdoor dining, public space, gathering, either for Elmire or just for general use. In the distance here, you'll see this is a mid-block crossing right in front of Variety Playhouse. This was one thing that was said so many times when we were doing the pop-up studio, was that there wasn't a good place to cross between Colquitt and Ouachita, and that this crossing, we looked at closely at a lot of different locations for this, and we think this is a great location. So that is showing what we would call a speed table condition, sort of a raised condition that allows pedestrians to safely get across. Enhanced sharrows also shown here. Go back to the June video if you have questions about the bike facilities and network. We did look at a series of bike lanes. We looked at a cycle track here. We just felt like with all the different user groups, it was at such the detriment of the small businesses to remove parking to create that. So we feel like the sharrows work well here, actually, and people tend to drive pretty slow along this portion of Euclid. Let's make them drive slower and make them more cautious of cyclists. Moving west, continuing to move west. Here we are at Austin. I talked about this in the last video. The amazing potential, the amount of roadway here is kind of crazy. and especially considering the amount of cyclists and pedestrians that use this. So here's the existing addition, and here's the potential. What you're seeing here are a very transformational idea for this intersection, creating a pretty exciting and pretty actually substantial little pocket park here, Plaza on this corner of the intersection, really tightening this corner up, shortening the pedestrian crossing distance. We're moving this curb out 7-8 feet, really making it way better for pedestrians. Showing here, you could have some street art within the crosswalk that maybe advertises events for the Horizon or other things going on at the community center. Maybe some illuminated Horizon signage up here. You kind of notice here that we're sort of punching the wall here, allowing for a pedestrian entrance at the corner. Maybe the parking lot in front of the Little 5 Points Community Center becomes sort of an outdoor stage or temporary pocket park or performance space when it's not needed for parking. So what else am I going to say about this? We are showing a conversion to what we call a mast arm intersection here. So there aren't wires. They're just sort of suspended on these arms. So overall, a very transformational change for this Austin intersection with tremendous potential for all users, safety for pedestrians, cyclists, traffic calming, as well as creating a gateway both to Little 5 Points from the west and to Inman Park from the east. Okay, so in a nutshell, those are our ideas and recommendations for Euclid Avenue. There's an updated site plan, illustrative plan, and construction documentation plan on the website, l5pa.com. I encourage you to take a look at it. Let us know your comments, questions, suggestions. Now's the time to let us know. And with that, I'm going to wrap up Euclid and tell you about some of the other initiatives that we've been doing under the larger Little 5 mobility study. One being Moreland Avenue. You know, from the very beginning of this project, we've heard a ton about Moreland Avenue, mostly concerns about pedestrian safety and speeding, but also some about traffic signal timing. Through the process, we've worked with the CID to come up with some concepts for some, I would call them basic improvements that are more to do with pedestrian safety and bike facilities to some extent. So we've looked at bike buffering techniques along Moreland. We've looked at street trees. We've looked at the what we call the jug handles to some extent. And we've spent a lot of time talking about the viaduct. In other words, the tunnel connecting Little 5 Points to Edgewood Retail District. The graphic on your screen was just a very quick idea we had for a short-term pedestrian safety barrier. I'm not going to go exhaustively through all the concepts that we have put together for Moreland Avenue. Those will be in the final report. I think the attitude that we've taken towards Moreland is Euclid is the opportunity in terms of mobility and placemaking for Little 5 Points. Moreland is a challenge that needs to be solved via basic safety improvements. And so we focused our efforts on Moreland on the safety improvements, whereas we focused our efforts along Euclid on the placemaking, art, and amplifying the unique features of the district. Another thing I wanted to mention is the Little 5 Points parking and curbside management study that we've been working on for several months. Our partner, Kimley Horn, has done a ton of work on this. But basically, I'm not going to go through all the different tenets of this, but what it is it's an investigation of the different both on-street and off-street parking facilities throughout the district, and then how can we build consensus within the business community around a larger parking district that would be administered by throughout the whole district with common parking fees, with maybe an app and things of those nature. This information will be on the website soon, and I encourage you to take a look. So that's mostly what we have for you today. But you're not done. In terms of next steps, what I need you to do is please take the online survey. It should take you 10 minutes, maybe 5 if you're really, really fast. One thing I would say about the online survey, the survey questions are about both videos. So they're about the content I just showed you today, and they're land use and redevelopment and mobility questions from the content from the June video. So if you don't remember that, you could at least go back and skim through that video. So take the online survey, participate in the virtual workshop. It's next Thursday, October 8th from 6 to 9 p.m. Look for the final Little 5 mobility plan in December. There's a lot of information on l5pa.com. That website is being populated currently with a lot of different things. So if it's not there today, it may be tomorrow. And again, the online survey and the virtual workshop invite, the links are below in the video description. So thank you so much for your time, and have a wonderful day.